Fortunately, our distinguished guest speaker, Professor Blumin, doesn't require a PowerPoint or anything technical like that, so so we're kind of safe by that. Thanks everybody for coming today. I think it should be an interesting day of information. I especially want to thank Mark. Where's Mark? Mark Yallum is outside the door here, so he really inspired this whole event, and that's why we're here today. I was kind of hitching along for the ride just because we have some common interest in sharing and preserving Kingston's amazing heritage and history. And I know so many of you, I see a lot of faces in the crowd that have that deep interest and concern, share that. So we're going to have a lot of speakers today. Well, not too many, but it should be a very varied show. A couple of announcements. I don't know who still needs an agenda. I can pass that around. Nina Postupack sends her regrets. Oh, sure. Sends her regrets. She was going to come in and speak about the Pearson House. But I think a lot of folks may already know about that. So she's been a very hardworking volunteer on that and other issues related to the county's interest and involvement in preserving our heritage here in Kingston and the county. Kitty McCullough is here. She will be speaking, presenting for Legislator Jennifer Schwartz-Berky, who mailed something in. She's out of town right now and was hoping to be here in person. So thank you, Kitty. And just going through the list that we have, Jeff. Oh, hi. Jeff Miller is here. He's going to speak. He was just named the Ulster County Historian, so congratulations, Jeff. Thank you for being here. And because this is all related to the county and even beyond the county, connections of all sorts, including the canal, we have Dr. Eileen Camasso here. Where did I see her? Hi, thank you for being here. I think she's the Vice President of the D&H Canal Society, and she's going to have some words about that. Is William Rhoads here? Oh, thank you. You're going to say a few words too. So he's Professor Emeritus from SUNY New Paltz. And who am I missing? Oh, Ed Ford. Is that here? Oh, I didn't see that. Ed's is our city historian. Will have a few words to say as well. So this is going to be primarily about the Booth House and its history and its place. It's been a well-documented artifact and part of Kingston's history. The diaries are extensive. Jeff Miller has been a student of those diaries for quite some time, so we'll shed some light on the stories that they tell. Lowell, I'm sorry I missed you. You're going to be speaking as well, and you recently published your book, The Streets That Built the City, so thank you. So I think without further ado, I'm going to just introduce Professor Blumin. Professor Blumin, would you like to just go right into what you're going to be speaking about?
Sure.
I think I don't have your CV here, so I'm just going to let you dive right in. So,
okay.
Professor Stuart Blumin.
The CV doesn't matter at all. What matters is the Nathaniel Booth House. That's why we're here. I'm delighted to be here, by the way. For those of you who don't know me, a little bit of the CV. I wrote a book many years ago, about Kingston. It was a project that I loved doing, I fell in love with the city itself when I first saw it. I want to do this work. It's a little bit about that work as it relates to Booth in the house in a minute. And I went on to do some other work. I gather I've seen one copy. I gather some people are reading my later book, The Emergence of the Middle Class. And I don't know if you've noticed, if you started with the preface, you have seen the first 2 words of that rather long book are Nathaniel Booth. So I'm here today, and I'm glad to be here. Okay, we're talking about saving a piece of the fabric of this city, a small piece, a house, nothing more than a house. And I'd like to offer 3 good reasons for doing it. One is the man that we associate with it, Nathaniel Booth. The man himself, fairly ordinary guy in a lot of ways. He wasn't the governor, he wasn't a general, he didn't hit 600 home runs, he didn't invent a microchip processor. He was a grocer, he was a freelance bookkeeper, he was a shipper of bluestone, made a pretty good living finally, but he kept a diary, a very special diary, when he was a young man. Now, I gather there are more, the diary that's at the Senate House is just one of several. I'm looking, there are 2. I'm going to try to find that, so you'll help me find that second one. The diary that I read in great detail was kept between 1847 and 1854, when Booth was a young man, a young widower, and I imagine him sitting in that house on long, lonely evenings in the metropolis of Wilbur, passing the time in this way. Now, I've read a lot of diaries as a fellow who spent a lot of time being an American historian. I don't remember ever reading a diary as rich, as interesting, as full of life, as full of meaning for us to take back to the past as this diary. That's why the first 2 words of my longer book, done years later, is Nathaniel Booth. That sentence reads something like, Nathaniel Booth must bear part of the responsibility for this book. And I'm passing the buck, you see. And what I meant was, what I went on to say was, years ago I had done this study of this small city, small emergent city, in a world of emerging cities. And this diary really was the best source I had. There are plenty of other sources, but this is what made that city come alive and allowed me to write with some confidence about the nature of that community as it emerged from a rural, old rural community into a very robust, a small city. And then I said that, but he stuck with me in a different way. That he was a fellow who was not being written about by other historians. This was at a time when it was a really, really marvelous emergent literature which analyzed the emergence of the American working class in the first stages of industrial development in this country. And there was a longer tradition of elite studies. You write about people who had a lot of money. I'm thinking of all the books that will be written about Donald Trump now. I didn't say that. It'll be really, really great though, right? You won't believe how great it is. But nobody was writing about the Nathaniel Booths of the world. And I said, I owe a lot to this guy. This guy lived with this guy. So he and I are going to write this book. And we did. Anyway, but the diary means a lot to me. It should also mean a lot to you. Because he's your venerable bead. He's your chronicler. He illuminates a past of this city in an extraordinary way. As I said, I've read maybe hundreds of other diaries of 19th century Americans, and I don't recall reading one as useful and as wonderful as this diary. But why is that important? Well, we know Kingston when we think about Kingston historically, first and foremost as the place the British burned down for payback, when this place had the audacity to become the first capital of this new thing called New York State. And that's a notable event, and that's fine, we should know about that. We also know that Peter Stuyvesant sort of clumped his way up from New Amsterdam to insist that these rowdies here in the Esopus Valley, who were getting in trouble with the people who had been here first, made them build a stockade around the village. And so that's something that some people know about. That's fine too. That was done in the middle of the 17th century. Not enough attention to is paid, I think, to the emergence of this place as what it remains today, which is a vibrant small city in a region and a highly developed region of other cities, including that rather bigger one down at the mouth of the river over here, which is very much complicit in the emergence of this place as a city. 7 generations of rural life suddenly transformed into a new thing, a small city. Hence the urban threshold, the phrase I use. I always regretted not using Kingston in the title or the subtitle. Sure, I sold fewer books here as a result. But in any case, big deal, right? But that's a very, very important part of Kingston's history. When the canal was built and the place grew and Rondout developed into what it was, a fascinating immigrant town, so different from that older, stuffier place up the hill. It's a fascinating part of the history of this city, very, very pivotal. The city you live in today, it took shape then, and it happens to be the time when this young man, this young widower, had nothing better to do at night than to keep this diary. Although we're going to hear from Geoffrey Miller about how one other thing he did was go singing, right, and all of that. I'm not going to say any more about Booth, the person, because we're going to hear from Geoffrey Miller about him in greater detail, something I really look forward to. But my point is this merely, is that he wasn't a governor, fine. He is a really pivotal citizen of this city. He's somebody that should be celebrated. Somebody who should be known and celebrated. The children of this place should know about this man and should read this diary. And that should be programmatic. So Nathaniel Booth himself is reason number 1 for saving the Nathaniel Booth house. The second reason is the house, the building itself. Now I gather some people are going to talk a little bit more about the house. I don't know, Mark, you're going to have some words to say about that. I think I don't know so much about it. I don't know much about it. I didn't even know the Booth house had been identified as such until Mark Yallum had told me about it. And we went there this morning and saw it from the outside. It was a thrill to see it. The house itself, a wonderful piece of local history, a vernacular house, a federal style house, but very much in the vernacular tradition, built out of bluestone, in large part. Built of local materials. A house really, I don't know of many other houses in this area that are anything like it. I came up by bus from Gotham this morning and I was looking out the window to say, well, how many Booth houses am I going to see out the window here today? Exactly 0. This is it's at once unique and typical. And it connects us with a past, in a way that, again, is very, very precious. And that, in fact, brings me to the third reason for preserving this house, and that is preservation itself. Booth, the house, and the very act of preservation. Preservation sounds like a good thing, doesn't it? And it is. It's a very important thing. It has a lot more to do than being quaint. It's not something that should impress upon us the pastness of the past. It should impress upon us the presentness of the past. We live in historical environments, all of us do. Even if they were built this morning. This morning is part of history, right? This place was not built this morning. We go around, we do our business each day. We don't think about it very much. But the presence of these physical artifacts of the past enrich our lives. Not because it makes us seem smart, it just allows us to connect ourselves with the stream of history, and more importantly, perhaps, a particular stream of history, that is the history of this place that you spend your daily lives in. It may or may not have a big effect. I remember raising this years ago. I was doing an alumni course in England. It was all, Cornell alumni paying much too much money to go on this cruise around the British Isles, and I showed some slides. Yeah, I could do that. And I remember showing a slide which was a picture of a street scene in Canterbury. And it was just an ordinary street scene with a bunch of people walking up and down the street. There were cars parked on the sidewalk, or on the street next to the sidewalk. And there was a Boots the chemist and a local pub and all of that. And behind it in the background was a wall with a gateway, an archway. And that wall was 1,000 years old. All right, it was built by the Normans to surround what became obviously a cathedral city. And people not paying any attention to it. So I raised the question. I said, what difference does it make to these people who are going into Boots the chemist to fill their prescription, that right behind them, 100 or so feet away, is a wall 1,000 years old? Does it make any difference? And I said, what we're going to do is try to, in this little course, is try to figure out how it makes a difference. And I think by the end of it, I think we all agree, yeah, it makes a difference. And it makes a difference that you've got the stone houses of the stockade. It makes a difference that you call it the stockade, that you remember that. That's not 1,000 years, but what is it, 300 years or so? I don't know. 350, yeah, thank you. And that various other things that remain on the landscape, just because they remain on the landscape, and nobody bothered to take them down or whatever, or reuse them, that they're here for us, and they do have an effect. They enrich our lives. They deepen our lives. Without them, we're diminished. We have a nice little example, bad little example, just down the hill. When Rondout was urban renewed in 1960, I was delighted to see this morning there's a historical marker which referred to urban renewal in Rondout in a negative way. It removed something and replaced it with something that was not authentic to this place, including the new City Hall. I'm so delighted that it's back here. This place reflects Kingston. This is part of what this place is. And so, even apart from the specific virtues, the specific qualities of this particular site and the particular person who inhabits that site, inhabited that site at that critical moment of Kingston's history, the very act of preservation of small pieces of the historical landscape that, without our even thinking about it, enrich our lives in ways that, if you do think about it, become very tangible and meaningful. Those three things really, can I say, require us to preserve this particular house. It may have meant nothing to you, probably didn't, but once preserved, it adds to that palimpsest that we use every day in our lives. And I want to just say one last thing, and there are a lot of speakers, so I could go on for a long time. I'm not going to, uncharacteristically. But I just want to say that you don't know me, but I think I know you. I think I know this about you, that this place probably has a better historical consciousness of this sort than almost any other place. Maybe not any other place, but most places that I know. You're particularly attuned to this, and I think you are because consciously or unconsciously, you have been experiencing this palimpsest around you. This place that is pretty well preserved despite the trepidations of the violations of that urban renewal project foisted on you. So I think you're a special people in this regard. You're the right people to rise to the understanding that's required to preserve that particular piece of which is your past. I'd like you to do more. I don't know if I'm speaking out of bounds here, perhaps you'll tell me, is I'd like to see this house acquired by an organization, or whether it's the city or whether it's Mark's organization or whether it's some NGO that hasn't been founded yet. I'd like to see that house not only preserved but enhanced, really cleaned up. I'd like to see it furnished with mid-19th century Hudson Valley furniture. A little bit of trouble getting a parking lot big enough for a school bus, maybe across the street, but there should be a historical marker on the street, a historical plaque on the house. A replica of the Booth diary should be on a writing desk in the right room that you'll figure out which it is. School children should be taken to it, as well as to other similar places, and they should be taught to be sensitive in the ways that I know that so many of you are about the experience, the enhancing experience of preserving the palimpsest of our place. This is a very special city in a very special region, and it's our obligation to preserve this little piece of it. Okay, I'll yield to the next person. Thank you for coming. I didn't know there would be questions, but I'd be delighted. I want to say, first of all, I want you to see how large, this is a large turnout. And that's what I mean. You know, you're here because you know why you're here, that this should be done. You know why you're here. Yeah, if anybody has a question or two, I'd be delighted, but I think the other speakers do want to get up here. No? Good, fine. We can do this later, or we can, and I'll be around if anybody wants to chat. Thank you, folks. Do it.
We will have a Q&A towards the end of this. Thank you very much, Professor.
My pleasure.
Interesting.
Truly my pleasure.
And we did let you go on a long time.
Dangerous thing to say to me.
So, Jeff, why don't you tell us about Nathaniel Booth and the Booth brothers? This one? And I'm just going to fit with it here.
Okay. Can people hear me? Because I do tend to mumble. So, yell if you can. I took the liberty to write some notes down because Booth has been bubbling away inside of me since I first read the diary in 1979 when I was doing some research on the music history of Kingston in conjunction with a graduate course at NYU's Department of Musicology. And like Professor Blumin, we spoke on the phone, and I think we bonded instantly because once Booth gets under your skin, there's no getting him out. And I have spent these last many years as I've become a father and went back to public school teaching and all the different twists and turns of my life. Booth has always been there, and I've always wanted to have an opportunity to be one of the agents that brought him to life, because that diary is just such a precious thing, and what he reveals in it is a precious thing. So I was hooked on the diary from the very first page. Again, if you remember, I was exploring music in Kingston. And on the very first page I read visited L.M. King's. Miss R complains of indisposition, so our music was very dull. And I just had to read on. While the story Booth relates in his diary is a personal one, the full measure of the man can only be understood and fully appreciated in the broader and more universal context of a young man coming of age in a post-colonial industrial America, bursting with industry and energy. And I really have to thank Professor Blumin for the Urban Threshold, because that is one of the eye-opener books for me when I was going through this work. I see Booth as the archetypical Jacksonian, a young man of no particular pedigree, conscious of his lower station in life, yet dedicated and determined to make something of himself by dint of hard work. His story is an American story, the story of the American dream. Reading through the Booth diaries, it is impossible not to be in awe of the man for his strength in the face of adversity, his ability to pick himself up over and over again, and despite the long hours and hard work, to still have the stamina to fill over 1,500 pages with observations about his life and the lives of friends and acquaintances, and about local society and national news, all recorded with great wit, insight, and attention to detail. He is also an ardent painter and musician, and in his spare time, stuffed animals, built several small boats to use on the creek, and traveled frequently to New York City for business and pleasure, never missing the opportunity to go to the theater or take in a concert. He was truly a Renaissance man. Booth was born in Lancashire County, England, of Catholic parentage on November 17, 1819. He immigrated to the United States with his family in 1828 at age 8½. He spent his youth in Saugerties, where his father worked as a superintendent in a factory, and where he took his first job at age 12 as a clerk with a local merchant. Booth was highly sensitive to his station in life. On only the second page of the diary, while living and working in Georgetown, Washington, D.C., Booth reflected, "I am worn down. For a week, the duties of the store have been immensely irksome, and the weather very hot. Day after day, we toil and sweat for the bare privilege of living. Why is it that some are so more favored than others? Why are many born to fortunes, to luxury, to ease, while hundreds and thousands are compelled to struggle through poverty and misery, and think themselves fortunate in procuring earnings sufficient to keep body and soul together? Surely the ways of providence are inscrutable." Booth struck a similar chord 7 years later, writing about the passing of his father. Papers simply mention the death of father. Had he been rich, how different it would have been. What eloquent obituary notices and communications would have crowded out other matters in our village's valuable journals. But alas, he did not leave acres and bank stocks and rent rolls. And so he is forgotten, while his more fortunate worldly contemporaries blaze in large capitals and excite exaltation in the eloquence of pulpit, bar, and press. So the world wags. May he rest in peace. Amen. Booth began his diary as a young man in his mid-20s while living in Georgetown, where he owned or worked as a clerk in a variety of retail businesses. While in Georgetown, Booth married the daughter of a friend and a business associate. His wife gave birth to a baby girl, and he enjoyed an active social life. Some days he seemed upbeat about his prospects, and other days not so much. In an entry that could just as easily be dated February 26, 2016 as February 26, 1846, Booth wrote, Bought a ticket for the third time, bought a lottery ticket for the third time in my life. 10/68/13. Although opposed to this mode of spending or acquiring money, the desire to try my luck, together with the laudable desire to pay off our old debt, overreached my scruples, and I made the venture. And he concludes with a poem. To pay my honest debts, I bought this ticket. Oh, grant that it may draw a prize. Surely an act cannot be very wicked, from which unquestionable good can arise. By labor and economy I've sought to attain this end, but unsuccessful yet. I've only gained experience dearly bought, while interest has been added to my debt. I do not ask a fortune from your hands, for that has its sorrows and pains. I only ask for debt's insatiate bands and withering influence to be free again. Down on his luck in Georgetown, Booth received an invitation to move to Minajo, Missouri, 70 miles from St. Louis, and to take an interest in a lead mine. At first, he couldn't decide. We will have to sell everything on earth to raise the means of traveling, and we'll arrive at our destination almost penniless and engage in a business I know nothing about. Truly, I am at a loss how to decide. If we ever go to the West now, while we are young, is the time. Who shall advise? Ah, who? To go or not to go, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in mind to suffer the slings and arrows of our changed fortunes, or to take up legs against so many troubles, and by removing end them, to go, to change, and it goes on. But by the next day, Booth announces, we have made up our minds to go, and I have written to Mother Tom Jim accordingly. We will part with everything, no matter how cherished it may be, except Ellen's piano and my violin. These we will take with us to cheer our solitude in Missouri. We propose starting about the 1st of next month. We follow his journey from Georgetown to St. Louis by carriage and steamer, then to Minajo. Money continually a problem. Things go from bad to worse for Booth upon his arrival at the mine. His wife Ellen has premonitions that things will not go well for them, that Nathaniel will die. Only it is Ellen who dies of a fever several months after their arrival, leaving Booth alone on the brink of financial ruin with his one-year-old daughter, Ellie. Booth flirts with bankruptcy for another year, toiling in the mine before finally deciding to call it quits and head back to Saugerties, carefully chronicling the almost month-long journey by steamboat. Finally, on July 1st, 1847, Booth wrote, left New York at 6:30 a.m. Every mile now brings me nearer home and opens to the sight some familiar object. The Palisades are past, and now the highlands loom into view. I am truly on the beautiful Hudson again, though I can scarce believe it. Oh, how dear is every rock I see. The sloops in every little vessel is full of interest, associated as they are with my early recollections. How beautiful is every scene. The highlands are now behind us, and our boat glides like an arrow through the quiet stream. Hooray, the Catskill Mountains are in sight now. I begin to realize the truth. The enchanted hills, as the old settlers called them, show their bold outline and deep blue color in strong relief against the sky. On the summit of one, I can now see a small white speck, the mountain house, pointing out the home I am returning to. Trouble, care, and misfortune are for a while forgotten in the happy anticipation of meeting once more my friends here. Ah, our lighthouse, Saugerties Creek and the village in the distance, home sweet home. Booth spends that summer getting reacquainted with family and friends, and on September 27, 1847 announces, I have purchased the right title, goodwill, etc., of a small store in the village of Wilbur, and am again launched on the turbulence and unsafe sea of trade. The store and the place deserves more than a passing notice. The form of the former would puzzle Euclid to describe. It has 3 compartments, which may be classed small, smaller, and smallest, irregular in shape, of different heights, and possessing more angles than a starved cow. Booth continues, now for the village for which, Booth continues, now for the village for which art has done little and nature a great deal. As the Scotchman said of his country, it would be very extensive indeed were it only rolled out. The village lies in a break of hills on each shore of the stream. It is built in the same order as my store, that is, disorder. An imaginative mind would suppose a wagon load of houses had dumped from above, An imaginative mind would suppose that a wagon load of houses had been dumped from above, which stuck fast where they struck, and consider it miraculous that they did not fall bottom upwards. The business of the place is burning lime and cement and shipping lumber and country produce to the New York market, and my business is supplying the operations and others with food for the inner and clothing for the outer man. There is no society, and how Tom has continued to live for years here is a mystery, like the place itself. But Booth did find a home for himself in Wilbur, and 2 years later could write. My birthday, age 30, almost half the allotted time for man. I feel about 40. I'm doing a big business for a small man with a small pocket, a smaller purse, and the smallest portion of the root in it. I have 10-minute work in the quarry, 2 sloops and 3 crews employed independent of the store. If I make no bad debts, I am doing better than ever before. God has been good to me. In my remaining time, I would like to share with you a few of Booth's observations about life in antebellum Kingston, Rondout, and Wilbur. These are not meant to be all-inclusive. They are a handful of snapshots, liner notes, if you will, or the little blurbs from reviews on the jacket of a bestseller. They are meant to tantalize you and to stimulate a deeper interest in this unique and charismatic individual. Snapshot 1. Booth's recollection of a trip to Stony Clove near Hunter in the Catskills in June of 1839, triggered by a trip to the Potomac River in 1844. The entry, it seems to me, is imbued with much the same romantic ethos as his contemporaries among the Hudson River painters, the Knickerbocker poets, and the fathers of American landscape architecture. Booth wrote, "We passed through the Clove to a tolerable back country with larger trees. Nature was in its primitive simplicity. Here the woodsman axe had never raised an echo. The first stillness had never been broken unless by stragglers like ourselves with the rifle of an occasional hunter. We erected a rough hut and passed the night in this solitude, keeping watch alternately. We had a flute with us, awakening the hills for the first time to the charms of music." Snapshot 2. As an observer of the cultural life of the community, Booth was, to borrow a phrase from the Urban Threshold, rather crusty. As an example, Booth attended a concert by Mr. Griswold on May 14th of 1850. On May 22nd, the following assessment of Mr. Griswold's performance appeared in the Kingston Democratic Journal. His splendid high tenor voice, his modulations were very beautiful. Altogether, we consider Mr. Griswold one of the most pleasing vocalists that we have ever heard. Writing in his diary the night of the concert, Booth's assessment reads, "Attended a concert given by 2 young men from New York. Mr. Griswold, the singer, has no voice for a concert room, though agreeable in the parlor. I sometimes felt sorry for Griswold. He labored under embarrassment, and in one piece broke down entirely. There was nothing manly in his voice. He piped as small as any lady in a wire-drawn tenor, so fine and thin that a girl might envy him. On leaving, however, he was applauded. His review of civic events could be equally blunt. A new fire engine having been purchased by Kingston, the fire companies turned out en masse and dragged their machines through the hot glare of the sun and dust for half the day, while the immortal brass band of Kingston blew their brains out on their ill-tuned instruments. After a while, they managed to frighten a horse who ran away, dashed the wagon to pieces, throwing 2 persons with great violence to the ground. Booth's biting review of the first soiree of the Wilbur Dancing School reads as follows. At night, much against my better inclination, attended the first soiree of the Wilbur Dancing School under the patronage of Francis Hosman, Esquire, professor of legs in the winter and of a canal boat in the summer. The company was made up of extraordinary materials, good, bad, and indifferent. Old and young, wed and single, it was, to use the popular phrase, the event of the season. Booth described the music of the band as the furious music of the half-drunk white and black orchestra who were fiddling away as if their salvation depended on the greatest number of scrapes per minute. And the technique of the dancing master, and I don't know that much about dance, but I understand that this was a period where ballroom dancing got so acrobatic that ballet kind of split off from regular dancing. So this, he talks about it. He, the professor and captain, etc., was wonderful, almost sublime. 2/3 of the night he passed between the floor and the ceiling. He would spring from the ground like a rodent, tie his legs in half a dozen knots, untie them, send them flying about like the spokes of a wheel, crack his heels together 2 or 3 times, and come down, bounding again from the floor like an Indian rubber ball. Snapshot 5. Tragedies also find their way into the pages of Booth's diaries, minus the wit and sarcasm perhaps, but not his critical eye. On February 19th, 1849, he wrote, "A great fire appeared in Rondout, sending a stream of light along the ice on the creek on which we made the best of our speed. On our arrival, we found a terrible state of confusion existed as usual. We dashed into it, doing our best to save the property. The fire originated in a Livingston store from a stovepipe. The engines were very effective, particularly one from Kingston. Yet even these would prove unavailing to save the town had it not been for about 3 inches of snow on the roof of the houses and the air perfectly calm. 10 buildings have been destroyed, most of which were stores or shops with their goods. Several more damaged, and one sloop's mast, rigging, and upper works burnt. I, as well as the rest, worked hard until around 12 o'clock, when the flames being subdued, we dragged our wet and weary limbs home. A large quantity of goods, furniture, etc., saved from the flames, were stolen from the owners by a herd of land pirates that hovered about like vultures on a battlefield. On our return home, Mrs. Spears very kindly prepared a supper, which soon made us forget our fatigue." Snapshot 6. Booth describes a near tragedy and an encounter about it with his neighbor and business competitor, Ezra Fitch, that is revealing not only about the 2 neighbors and business rivals, but also about the dangers of living near and working in the enterprises that fueled Kingston's economy in the mid-19th century. 2 or 3 weeks ago, a quantity of stone was thrown from my quarry across the Rondout Creek, many of which fell in the yards, gardens, etc. of the inhabitants. One weighing 11 pounds fell in the street, yet no one was struck and nothing injured. As wonderful an escape as I've ever heard of. Fitch accosted me today and alluded to the accident. After some ill-natured remarks, he asked how it happened. I replied that it was one of those accidents that were beyond our control, that it could be neither foreseen nor avoided, that every precaution had been taken, that it was the first and only one since I had the quarry, and that from every attending circumstances it must be considered an accident purely unavoidable. Well, returned my unreasonable friend, we cannot have our lives endangered this way. These unavoidable accidents must be put a stop to and prevented. Mr. Fitch has entirely forgotten the unavoidable accident that killed a poor man at his dock a week earlier. Snapshot 7, moving day. And I don't know if you're familiar with moving day, but in the state of New York, May 1st was the end date and the beginning date for all leases. So for people renting before May 1st, you either signed a new lease for the place you were in, or you had found a new place to move to and had secured a lease for that. Then on May 1st, chaos. So what's most noteworthy to me is how well Booth's prose captures the frenetic energy that must have characterized that day. Move, move, keep moving, straw, soot, dust and ashes at every step, all confusion. Today, anything in the shape of a horse is invaluable. Hand carts are comfortable property. Wheelbarrows are great acquisition. A boat, in some cases, a treasure, and even baskets have risen 20% on their original value. Here goes wagon loads of dilapidated furniture, traveling for the 20th time, perhaps. Tables with 2.5 or 3 legs, rickety chairs, cradle without rockers, cracked looking glasses, damaged crockery, parboiled bedsteads, dirty clothes, old barrels, tubs, and the 1,000 trips and traps and contraptions incidental to housekeeping are exhibited to the moving throngs. Everyone had his or her arms full. All are on a trot. It is like the sacking of the city, like the scenes outside of a fire, but it's like nothing but itself. 1st of May in New York villages. Snapshot 8. Then there are the chilling entries, like the series of entries that began with one he wrote while leaving New York City on May 28, 1849. The cholera, which has been very destructive in St. Louis and the Southwest, has made its appearance in this city, it is said, on June 4th. Cholera is increasing in New York. In St. Louis, it is terrible. June 7th. Cholera reported on the increase in New York and expected here daily. June 17th. A man dies of cholera on board the R.L. Stevens coming up last night. The event has caused some alarm. June 18th. A son of John McCarthy's died suddenly of cholera this morning in Saugerties. June 25th. The cholera has made its appearance in Rondout. 4 deaths occurring last night. Morning cooler than usual. Cholera is increasing in Rondout. 5 more deaths since morning, making 9 today. It is impossible to come away from the diaries and travel writings of Nathaniel Booth without feeling a deep connection to the man and the world he so thoroughly and colorfully chronicled. As Professor Blumin said, and I'm very happy he said that because I have not read anywhere near the number of diaries that you have, but I've always felt that there's no other personal account of this period of time in America from the perspective of a common man, written with such uncommon wit and insight and willingness to bare his soul. To me, Booth is an untapped treasure, a diamond in the rough, waiting for the Kingston community to recognize his place in its historical narrative. Time is of the essence, and we have to get this one right.
Thank you, Jeff. Everybody can bear with me. I'm going to try to get this contraption running, and it reminds me I need to thank some people. Clark Richters is generously offered to report the event. Thank you very much, Clark.
Thank you.
Cale from Boschlin, who's a local businessman, gave me a dongle, but hopefully, oh, it looks like it's working. Kitty, I'm going to have you come up next, but I just wanted to say a couple words about what we've heard. That was a very personal account, and thank you for sharing that, Jeff. And between what you said and what Professor Blumin said, where'd you go? Okay. I think it really it tells a story of a time when there was so much happening, neighborhoods growing, and cities emerging from rural beginnings, and people coming here from all over the place, in this case England, to start a new life and build a family and a business and be part of a growing community. And it made me, I was reflecting on a time before cell phones and personal computers and fax machines, to when we actually wrote, journals and letters, and I remember those days, and it made me just reflect on the value of telling stories about where you live and where you came from, and what you want to do to help preserve it. This always happens to me in this room. For future generations to enjoy as well. And I also want to acknowledge my mother is here, and she was born right across the street here. And I'm also thinking about my grandfather and my mother's father, of course, having taught at SUNY for many years, and bringing up his three girls back then. And in fact, his house, their house, was just recently torn down to make way for a science building on SUNY campus. But for 35 years he taught there, and I always draw a lot of inspiration from my grandfather, Will, so thanks for coming on. Kitty, you want to come up and talk about, do a presentation on behalf of our new legislator, Geoffrey Schwartz-Berky, who's been tireless, as Kitty has been, and George Donskoy as well, and others in the audience that are too many to know. But Kitty, you've been working on Bluestone and just in the survey and all sorts of things. So you could easily present something on your own. But thank you for sitting in for Jennifer. And I'm gonna change the slides. I may ask you to do the same for me. Oh, okay. I'll do the best I can. Give me a minute to set this up, but you can start talking anytime you like.
Okay. You think I can use this one?
Yeah, try it.
Can you hear me? Oh, good. You can take this then. So I'm Kitty McCullough, and I have the pleasure of presenting for Jennifer Schwartz-Berky. I've worked with the City Historic Landmarks Preservation Commission over the last couple of years, 4 years, to conduct certified local government-funded historic resource surveys of Kingston's historic bluestone sidewalks and more than 1,200 structures in Midtown and surrounding the Stockade District uptown. We also had funding from the Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area to lay the foundation for a Kingston interpretive plan, which is fancy language for marketing research. Jack Braunline, our preservation coordinator for these projects, is also here today. And I just wanted to say briefly about what Dr. Blumin said about Kingston being unique in its interest for, in its heritage. Although the comprehensive plan, the committee, when they were interviewing people at the beginning, noted that the overwhelming majority of Kingston citizens value historic resources most. I don't think most people know that we have one of the first historic preservation organizations in the country. The National Historic Preservation Act is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year. Last year, the Friends of Historic Kingston celebrated their 50th anniversary. And even so, we also had one of the first certified local governments. We had some of the earliest historic districts. So there's this long tradition of value. Even so, we've never had staff until we started getting these grants and hiring Jack to be our preservation coordinator. And this year we have in City Hall Lisa Bruck, who has been our woman at City Hall, helping us with our surveys and so forth. And coincidentally, Lisa's the one who transcribed the Booth diaries for us, and she has located the additional diaries in the Byrd Library at the University of Syracuse. And so we're trying to get copies, facsimiles, money together to send her up there or whatever, so we can have those additional diaries. So Jennifer's sorry that she couldn't join us because she considers this meeting both very important and long overdue. She sends her thanks to Brad, to Mark, and to everyone who has worked to bring us together for this important discussion. She also wants to thank Ulster County Executive Mike Hine and Ulster County Clerk Nina Postupack and Eileen Camasso. Jennifer worked with Nina to create Ulster County's Heritage Gateway at the Person House, which celebrates not only the history of Kingston, but also invites heritage organizations throughout the county to present their work at the house on a rotating weekly basis. Jennifer's also working with the D&H Canal Historical Society on the adaptive reuse of the Depuy Canal House as a museum and visitor center that will celebrate that building's place at the crossroads of Ulster County's development as part of the canal. Dr. Camasso, the Vice President of the D&H Canal Historical Society, will tell us more later about what they're doing there. As a new member of the county legislature, Jennifer hopes to bring greater attention to the value of historic resources and the many sites, districts, and cultural landscapes that make Ulster County and Kingston so significant. I think we're ready for slide 2. The core of her work is the crossroads between historic preservation and urban planning. Preservation planning is a field that encompasses the care of historic communities and landscapes, as well as the individual sites that contribute to their significance. As was alluded to earlier, urban renewal was a very sad chapter in American history. Our rundown neighborhood in downtown Kingston lost more than 800 buildings and displaced hundreds of people, most of them low income, many of them people of color. But we are lucky in Kingston and Ulster County. We have so much that remains, and there is still time to celebrate it and to recognize how it gives us our sense of place that is the foundation of the way we value our daily lives, our relationship to our community, and with one another. We don't need to be a ruin. This is a living city. Next one. So how can Ulster County work with Kingston and the other communities to support the preservation of our significant cultural resources? In 2004, Jennifer began working at the County Planning Department. She reached out to hundreds of stakeholders over the years to provide technical assistance for their preservation and planning work. In 2007,